Hello, I'm Don Clark, and for the next few minutes, you are going to be part of a journey into the living history of a Bakersfield woman who has lived and is living a full and a remarkable life. We've chosen her as one of the great biographies of Bakersfield because we believe that from her life experiences and from the lessons she has drawn from those experiences, all of us, and especially you as young men and women, can learn invaluable lessons that will be of great benefit to you as you shape your values and choose your directions in life. And so it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to introduce to you a woman with a truly great biography, Wendy Wayne. Wendy, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Wendy, first of all, you have done so many things professionally in your life. Just list for us quickly the jobs you've held, the positions you've had, and some of the titles that have been on your door and on your business cards.
Well, my first job was at 13 as a secretary. Actually, I worked before then for my dad in his pharmacy behind the counter and then doing billing. But my real first job was as a secretary. And
at age 13?
Yes. And I have continued working since then. I took a short amount of time off when our sons were born and have had some very interesting careers, from swimming instructor to teacher. I was a secondary school teacher in New York and in Kenya and East Africa. I got a degree in zoology, and while I was working through college, I did work for a property management company keeping the books, which actually was one of the best training grounds for work I did later on, and I never even anticipated that I would use that. I worked in a lab doing ultrastructural pathology, and I have also worked as a nurse and a nurse practitioner, and I spent the last 20 years actually doing administration, which incorporated all of the prior skills I'd garnered from all my work experience and college education.
Give us a brief overview of the career, of the educational path you've taken. I know at some points you've raced through school, so take us back to grade school and bring us right on through that path of your life. Well,
I had a mother that had a lot of ambition for all 6 of her children, and particularly my sister and I. And so I went through elementary school fairly quickly and graduated from high school when I was 15 and started UCLA right away. And when I graduated from UCLA, I had applied to medical school and was rejected. That was a very difficult part of my life. And I decided to go to graduate school in pathology, thinking that might be a bridge, and then I could reapply and get into medical school, and decided that that really wasn't how I wanted to spend my time. So I went away to the Peace Corps for a couple of years, and when I came back, I decided I was really a people person, so I got a master's in public health, but I couldn't find a job in public health. And I was at a party one night, and somebody said, we're looking for people that are interested in becoming nurse practitioners. And I said, well, I'm not a nurse. And he says, yeah, but you've got all this background. And I said, fine. He says, can you speak Spanish? And I couldn't, but I said yes, because I was desperate for a job. And I got a job teaching nurse practitioners, and because I'd had some background, they took me into the program, and I became a nurse practitioner. And then I moved to Kern County, and they didn't know about nurse practitioners then in the 70s, so I went back to school and actually got a nursing degree. And many years later decided that I still wasn't finished with my education, and I got a doctorate in educational administration.
Wendy, you know, many young people, I think, as they apply to college and graduate school, fear that moment of rejection when the rejection letter comes. You've experienced that, and you said it was tough, but it's not the end of the world. Just tell us about that.
You know, it is very difficult to go through, and I think each of us has a period in our life when you're really low, and certainly that time was a real challenge for me. As I look back on my life, though, I recognize it was those very tough periods that were the greatest moments of learning. And oftentimes, out of rejection, you strive for new paths, and sometimes they take you to places that are just even better than they were before. And I look back and I think, you know, I could have been a physician, and I probably would have done a lot of varying things with that career. I am so happy now that I didn't, because it allowed me to have experiences that I never would have had I not had that challenge. First, learning from that stress and depression of being rejected, and then also having to sort of find a new path that opened doors that I would never have even knocked on.
Tell us a bit about your family. First of all, you said you were one of 6. I think you're second in that list of brothers and sisters. Tell us about your brothers and sisters, what they were like and what they're doing.
Well, we grew up in Los Angeles, and we were a mixed family, mixed in the sense that we had 3 homegrown and 3 adopted children. There were 3 daughters, and then my parents adopted 3 sons. And they are all pretty neat people. We all stay in contact. We did lose one brother to cancer when he was 5 years old. I have a sister who's a judge in Los Angeles, and another sister who worked for UCLA in the Career Alumni Services for a long time, and now she's a sought-after speaker. She speaks as a keynoter, and a brother who has had a number of careers. Well, both brothers have had a number of different careers, so it's been a fun family. And growing up in my house was unique in that we never knew who was going to be staying at our house. The doors were always open, and we had people there continuously. You know,
what did that do for you in your own outlook?
Well, you learn to be adaptable and flexible, that is for sure. And we certainly all came away from that experience knowing that there are no strangers in our lives. And if they were, then a few minutes later, they're not. And I think my husband and I have that kind of open door policy in our own house, and have taken in waifs and new friends over the years. And you know, I think it's enriched our lives.
Tell me about your dad.
My dad was a pharmacist, a very serious person who worked 16, 18 hours a day. And he was a person that never wanted any children, and then ended up with 6, so you can imagine. Very, very smart and very tender person that I have lots of positive feelings about.
You know, Wendy, so many young people, and even older people, men and women, boys and girls, there are critical periods of life where we seem to lack a sense of self-confidence and a sense of self-worth. You have 2 women in your life who really taught you to value yourself and to really face the world with great confidence. Tell us about those 2 women.
Well, certainly my mother. I mean, she was a can-do kind of person. She was the one that opened the doors of our home to anybody and everybody that came in. She never rejected anyone, and she instilled in us that you can do anything you want to do. She had her limits, of course. When I decided that I wanted to go in the Peace Corps, that wasn't for her daughter. Maybe the rest of the world could be enriched by that experience, but not me. And she had very high expectations. And when someone believes in you like that, then you start believing in yourself, and it just carries on. And I had the wonderful opportunity to meet another woman who was a victim of asthma at a very early age. And I met her while I was in high school, and she had dedicated her life to make sure that intractable asthmatic children, those children that don't respond to any medical treatment, had opportunities for treatment at a hospital in Denver. And she gathered a group of us around her, and we did fundraising and did speaking, and it was good training for the rest of my life, actually.
You've called these women feminists before there was feminism. What did you mean by that? And you said that in a very positive sense.
Well, you know, I grew up in the 50s, really. I was born in 48, and the women's movement really didn't start to the 60s. And so to have a mother that encouraged her daughters to go out and try things that would never have been acceptable, I think she really was a feminist. I remember one of the things that I did when I was little, we were swimmers, and we, at 3 and 4 years old, would demonstrate swimming to other people. There used to be a show called You Asked For It with Art Baker, and we were on that show because we not only swam as water babies, but one of the things that we did that was kind of unique was they would take my sister and I, and separately, up to the top of a high board and tie our hands and tie our feet together, and we would jump off and swim to the end of the pool. To demonstrate that children with disabilities could be taught to swim and that they could enjoy the same experiences that typical children had. And at the time, that was just fine with me. I mean, I looked at it was part of my life. I never thought it was quite unusual. And I tell people about it now, and they go, "Your mother let you do that?" I said, "No, my mother made me do that." There was nothing that she didn't think we could do.
That is amazing. I know that one of your heroes in early life was Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady and the wife of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Tell us why she was so important to you.
You know, she represents for me someone who saw way beyond our borders, that we are a world and we need to be paying attention to not only what happens in the United States, but in countries all over. And she was a woman of great passion, and when she identified an issue or a challenge, she took action on it, she responded, she made sure that whether it was a tenement problem or children not getting health care, that the government or nonprofits responded immediately. And I just heard recently that one of the things that she taught, and I think it's something that I believe in as well, is that you should do something every day that you're afraid of. Push yourself a little bit, take that risk. It's so easy to be complacent and sit back and not have that pebble in your shoe kind of feeling. And I think when you're willing to just push yourself a little bit, some amazing things happen.
Wendy, along those lines, I know that there was a movie and a book early in your life that also just ignited your spirit when you saw it and read it. Tell us about that.
Well, I love reading, and as a young child, that was the way that I traveled in my mind, and I think everybody should do that. I think it's a great way to experience life in the world. And one of the books that inspired me was Zorba the Greek. And what was so fascinating and motivating to me about Zorba was his love of life. And I was a kind of a shy kid in the beginning, and I think I still am kind of shy, actually. And his love of dance and just embracing the spirit of life around him, and being such an individual, that I think that's what I remember most about him, is his ability to laugh and dance and enjoy the world around him.
And you've certainly done that in your life.
Well, I think I've tried.
You know, so many young women are perhaps hesitant or reluctant or even a bit fearful about traveling. Not with you. Traveling has meant so much in your life. There's a map on your wall at home with pins all over it where you've been all over the world. Tell us why travel is so important to you and what it's done for you.
I think it's the best education that anybody can give themselves, because we have a tendency to find a comfort level and stay there. And it prevents us from knowing that there are other ways to live, that there are other thoughts that people have about, or approaches to the world and to life. And my experiences overseas have really been able to bring some perspective to what happens here. What some folks think is important once you've had the chance to travel and see what other people are living through, it just changes your perspective. Water, for example. You know, living in a village in Kenya where you have to carry water a mile in order to have it to bathe and cook and wash. It makes you realize when you turn a hose on and you're watering the concrete that that's such a waste. It's like gold in other countries. And we in this country have a tendency to be pretty wasteful.
Wendy, you were part of that generation who answered John F. Kennedy's call to join the Peace Corps and go out into the world and try to make a positive difference. Tell us about your Peace Corps experience, where you went.
I actually went to East Africa. I went to Kenya. I was one of the youngest members of my Peace Corps group, and there were 300 of us that went to Kenya at the time.
You would have been how old at the time?
I was 20, and I went against my family's wishes, which didn't make it easy to do, and it was a long ways away, but I was very sure that's what I wanted to experience. I arrived in New York where we had training and was at the bus stop. My mother had given me 3 big bright pink suitcases, and there was a woman down the way at the same bus stop with a guitar and a backpack and a little short haircut, and I looked at her and I went, I think I'm going to ask her where she's going. And she said she was going the same place, and I went, maybe this isn't the place where I should be going. We ended up being very good friends, and she was a super volunteer, actually.
What happened to the pink luggage?
I have one piece left, and it's hidden in our garage. I can't even open it, but it's a good memory.
Like so many who entered the Peace Corps, the world taught you far more than you were able to teach it. Tell us about some of those most important lessons that you've brought back.
You know, there is no question that that I came away a richer person than people who I went to spend time with. I was a secondary teacher, and I pretty much stayed a couple of lessons ahead of my students. Many of the students were very close to me in age. And I worked in what was called at that time a Harambee school, which is one that didn't have any funding. The parents, Harambee in Swahili means come together. It was very rural. I lived in a mud hut, running water, no electricity, and the 4 teachers taught every subject. I learned so much from my students about the value of family, of community. There was no one in those villages that fell through the cracks.
And by that you mean what?
Well, every village, it seemed, in Kenya had a crazy person, so to speak. And they were very well accepted. People in the village would feed them. They were always taken care of. No child was ever left alone because there was always somebody in a hut next to them that would take care of them while parents were in the shamba, in the garden. And I coming home, I realized that we have lost that ability to create a safety net within our own culture. You know, we don't know our neighbors very well anymore, and we depend on paid services now to sort of weave that net. And I think that experience that was reinforced in other cultures that I lived in, Israel, for example, taught me that I really need to put some effort into reweaving that safety net in the United States and in our community here in Kern County.
They are poor, yet no one falls through the cracks. We are rich, and many fall through the cracks. What exactly are those cracks, and how would you fix them?
The cracks are the lack of relationships and trust that I think comes from being in a very small community where everyone is interdependent. And we have a tendency to want our independence and shy away from dependence when we really are going to need every person around us in one way or another. And we have wonderful people in our community, all the helping services, of course, that we depend on. For example, if there's a fire, we call the firefighters. But on a day-to-day basis, I think we have to move towards reconnecting and establishing those trusting relationships that somehow, as we've evolved into this very affluent society, we've lost.
Wendy, in your life, you have actually bridged the 2 worlds. You've lived in the poorest of cultures, and you live now in the richest of cultures. Has that created a tension in you, any crisis of conscience that you struggle with?
I think I do. I struggle with it every day, and I have to say that I don't have to go to South America or to Africa or Asia to find very poor cultures. I can go 3 miles away in our own community and find people that are in need. I mean, I worked as a maternal child outreach nurse in Lamont at Clinic of Sierra Vista and did home visitings. There are people living, 15 people in a house very close to us, to this building. And so I think it's a dedication to seeing if we can't redistribute the wealth and provide for one another. And I think over the years have recognized that every person I come in contact with has some value. I mean, I can't fix a car. And I depend on people that have the skills to do that. And I have a huge amount of respect for the fact that they can. There is so much that we can learn from older people. And what are we doing with them in our culture? They're all put in little boxes and in rest homes, and we don't have the contact that we need to reconnect with that history. So I'm trying to, I guess, live the way I think we should be living.
Wendy, we've grown up hearing and believing that the American dream is the best dream, that the American way is the best way, the American way of life, material prosperity and comfort and security is the best way to live. But you've got some feelings that might not be quite true. Tell us about that. I'm
very happy and proud to be an American. I think we are one world, however, and I think that we need, as a society, and particularly our government, in relations with other countries, to understand the cultures that we are communicating with and take the time to respect what they have to say, and because many other cultures are based on thousands more years of history than the United States has, and we would do well to learn from those other cultures. I think we can enhance our own lives by understanding them. There's a great debate going on in this land about whether one can be truly moral without a religious base for that morality. Your thoughts on that? I think we need to understand that there are many religions in this world, and each of those, for the people who subscribe to them, provide a moral compass, if you will. And we need to find a way to embrace them, to try and understand them, and to live in peaceful coexistence with them. If you look back on history, so many conflicts have arisen out of religious discord, if you will. And I think we, as human beings, have evolved to the point where what's unique about us is our ability to have cognition, to think, and to understand one another, and we need to spend more time doing that. Wendy, you grew up as an ethnic Jew, but not necessarily as a religious Jew, and religion was not an important thing to you. Not that you were hostile to it, it just was at the fringes of your life, and yet you've chosen a sacrificial life, a dedicated life to the highest values. You're almost a classic example of living a good life without a religious base. Well, I think I've had a religious sort of compass, if you will. I think that my parents, while they didn't have us in religious school, taught those values, many of them stemming from what their parents had, and they both came from Jewish families. And in recent years, my oldest son, Larkin, and I have been rediscovering, if you will, the Jewish religion by sharing readings and spending a lot of time studying together, particularly trying to understand what Jewish teachings tell us about how we should be living our lives today, or guiding us, if you will, to the conduct that will create a better world. Which of those teachings have been most meaningful to you? Well, certainly respecting one another, and the basic golden rule, which I think is woven through most religions. And oftentimes, it's not one teaching, it's the process. And it's not just an understanding religion where that process of learning and moving towards understanding is important. I think in whatever you do, whatever job you have, whatever fun activity you participate in, it's the process that's as valuable as the end of the journey. Wendy, family was so important to you, and yet there came a point in your life where you broke with your family's wishes and actually went against what they wanted for you. But when you came back, was your family able to affirm what you'd learned and what it had done to you? What was your family's reaction to all that? I have Well, I think once I was back, they were okay with it. And I actually have a niece now who is doing very much a Peace Corps kind of experience in the Sudan. So that spirit, I think, of adventure and risk-taking and needing to feel like you're supporting people in another culture has carried on to another generation. And actually, both of our sons have done sort of Peace Corps-like experiences. Our older son was in Teach for America, which is a fantastic opportunity for young graduates to teach in under-resourced areas of this country. And our youngest son is in Guatemala working in an orphanage and taking people on treks up to a volcano to support that orphanage. So I think Gene and I feel pretty good about the fact that we've instilled in them this desire to make the world a better place.
Wendy, it's become kind of a humorous cliche of young women in beauty pageants or scholarship pageants that what they want is world peace. And yet you've really given serious thought to world peace and how that might be achieved. Share with us your thinking on those lines.
Well, first of all, I think if you don't have a dream, you're never going to have anything become a reality. So putting world peace, and I actually did put world peace down in my high school graduation book as my goal, is a very good first step. And I think the next step is to decide how you want to live that embodies the values you have. And then look around for models, role models that will help you define what you want to be. And I don't think you can find it in one person. I think you have to take a little bit of everyone. And that's why traveling and risk-taking, I think, has been so rich for me, because I have had the opportunity to see, sometimes it's just a moment that you spend with a person and you walk away and it's very much now a part of who you are. And I think I'm a compilation of the wonderful experiences and people who have come into my life.
Wendy, and out of all of these experiences, you have become a true pacifist. Tell us what that means to you and how that works in a world filled with such suffering and tragedy and evil.
Well, it starts at home and with your own interactions with other people and how you solve conflict. And I think conflict is good because I think it moves you to a new place. There's progress in it. But we are thinking human beings, and we need to use that intellect to talk about and have a dialogue about issues that we don't come eye to eye on. And when you can use your words to move through conflict to a resolution, then I think you've accomplished what we need to accomplish at a macro level. And I think we see that with young children. You spank a child, and what does that teach him? That that's okay, and that's how you resolve conflict, or that's how you teach discipline. It doesn't make sense to me. So I've tried to live a life where you use words and gestures and hugs, hopefully, to converse and to dialogue.
And when someone brings up the case of a Hitler or a Pol Pot or a Stalin and their massive atrocities and says, well, what about that? What about that? There's
no question that there are people that are allowed to evolve to places where they can't be allowed to stay within society. I mean, that's just a given. However, I've spent enough time in early childhood development programs to know that there are ways to teach children how to share, how to give back, put things back where they belong, to how to use their words when they have a conflict, and that those children, as they grow up, hopefully will take those lessons and use them as adults. And we have to start with the children. And that's why I gave up on nursing and well, not completely, but I went into the field of early childhood because I think that's where we have to put our energies. If we don't start there, it's lost.
Wendy, politics. We're taping this in the year 2005. What troubles you most about politics the way it's being practiced today in America?
Well, I think too much money is involved. I would love to see a part-time legislature at the state level. where the legislators have to work in their own districts at least part of the year, so they know what it's like to hire people and have to deal with things like workers' comp and health insurance. I think they'd become much more sensitive as policymakers if they had to do that. And I'd love to figure out a way to take the money out of the political system, because what it means is that very well qualified in the sense that they are good thinkers and can process information and make it right in law. Those really good people, if they don't have wealth behind them, aren't able to serve us.
Wendy, there's a book recently that has really fired your imagination, Incidents of a Dead Dog in the Night, I believe it's called. Tell us about the book, why it's touched you.
Well, it was given to me by a cousin, and I started reading it and just couldn't put it down. And it's this story about an autistic child who's 15, and the author was his teacher, and is able to tell you in words what this young Christopher is thinking and how he processes information. And it was so insightful because it helped me understand not only children with autism, but people that have phobias and fears that paralyze them sometimes. And I think we really need to try and understand people that are different than us and why they struggle.
Well, Wendy, it would take a remarkable man to be married to such a remarkable woman, and we're going to take a break, and we're going to bring your husband here to the set and talk with both of you for a few minutes. And we'll be right back. We're back with great biographies of Bakersfield and Wendy Wayne, and this time with her husband, Gene Tackett, who is one of Bakersfield's most knowledgeable, admired, and respected political and government consultants. Delighted to have you guys.
Thank you for
First
that
of all, if someone asks, why the different last names?
That's a good question. My dad was a little concerned about that, but this was back in 1970, and my dad says, "What's going on?" And I said, "Dad, she asked me if I wanted to change my name, and I said no." And he never said another word. But, you know, that was, Wendy has always been ahead of her time, and that was another one of those things. Why give up your name? And now it's very common with women and in relationships. But when I was on the Board of Supervisors, I was single, and I actually got married about 3 months into my first term. And the fact that I got married was secondary to the fact that I married somebody who kept her birth name.
Wendy, you have a very full life going, and suddenly out of the blue, where did Gene come into the picture? What drew you two together? What was the attraction?
Oh, that's a good question. We met in Los Angeles. Gene was the director of something called Action, which was Peace Corps in Vista. And if you talk to him for any amount of time, you will find he's quite an engaging conversationalist. And when you say somebody wooed you, well, he did that to me. There is no question. And he just was there in my life at the right time in the right place. And we ended up actually traveling around the world together. And it took a while to figure out that I even wanted to be married. He's definitely the right person, though.
You know, I've heard some wisdom that the way to know if it truly is the right person is to travel with that person. Would you recommend that?
We were together 8 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And at the end of that time, I just figured if we could resolve all those things with transitions from one country to another and moving through all kinds of transportation, we could do anything in life together.
And Gene, the attraction and the fascination on your side?
I just had never met anybody else like Wendy, and ironically, neither one of us really had any strong desire necessarily to get married or have children. But the relationships just evolved in such a positive way, and as Wendy said, when you're together for 8 months traveling, and then she was very helpful in my first political campaign, the relationship just blossomed and developed, and it still does. Every day is a new fun day for us after 28 years of marriage.
You know, I would think for some people having such full lives, such busy schedules, as both of you have, is a stress on the marriage. It stretches the marriage apart. It seems to work just the opposite for you. Tell us how that works.
I'd like to know. It is not always fun and games. There are conflict, there has been tension, and we figured out a way to work that out And I think the main thing is that we both allow each other to have our own lives, to support each other for whatever we want to do. Wendy has been very, very supportive to me over my political life, and then as I've moved on to other kinds of employment, and I've tried to be the same with her and to be supportive. And I think out of that support comes a real bond and a real love, and the sum is greater than the parts. It's our relationship together is really makes our lives much greater than they would be separately.
You've raised together two very remarkable and fine sons. What do you think you did right to have that outcome in their lives?
I think it was their father, actually.
In what way? Go ahead, explain that.
Well, we were very fortunate that my parents lived in McFarland. That's where I grew up. And so the kids had lots of grandparent time. And I think that's real important. We also took them to LA, so they had contact with Wendy's parents as well. But there's nothing like that third generation to sort of help with the grandkids. They were very helpful. But we have both always thought that our kids' responsibility, as well as ours, was to make the world a better place. And our kids got that every day. And they obviously had good genes from Wendy. They're very bright. They did well in school, and that's really helpful. But both of them have worked really hard to make the world a better place. And it does take a village. I know sometimes that Hillary Clinton books that it sets people off, but we've had lots of help from neighbors and relatives and friends. So both of our boys have had multiple role models that I think have been very positive.
You know, I've asked both of our sons, what do you think it is that in growing up that was so important to you being who you are? And the two things that both of them said were the fact that we always had meals together, and when we sat down at a meal, we didn't talk about just what happened during the day. We talked about current events, and we philosophized and challenged each other. And the other was that we traveled and that we brought people into our home, and that expanded their horizons beyond our nuclear family.
It's said that it takes a child to make a parent an adult. What do you think you most learned from your sons? I had
a little fortune. I got out of a fortune cookie when the kids were very young, and it said, "Your kids are a mirror. You know, when you see them, you see yourself." And so every time I would look in the mirror in the morning when I would get up, I'm going, this is what my kids are looking at. And I would watch them, and I would see a lot of things that I did or that Wendy had done in our kids. So they've kept us young, and you know, it feels good to have good kids. So there's a certain amount of accomplishment in that. So they make me feel young, or make both of us feel young.
What's next for you as a couple?
Wow. I have so many ideas about things I want to do, and I just know what it's not. And I'm not a TV watcher. I can crochet, but I can't do it for very long, and I can't do it unless I'm doing something else along with it. So it will involve traveling and living someplace else at some point.
I've been in your living room, and having come from 18 years in television, I noted that there was no television that I could see there. Was that true of your home through the growing up years of your sons?
That was a very strategic decision. And when the kids were growing up, there was a period where all their friends had TVs in their rooms, and that was just foreboding. We do have TVs in our house. They just aren't in places where people gather. And it was a very strategic decision.
And the benefits of that, Gene?
Well, I'm still a little different. I mean, I do watch a lot more TV than Wendy. When I grew up, we had TV trays, and we listened to Cousin Herb Henson during the dinner time at 5 o'clock. And so I've always had a TV need, and I still do. But they're hid sort of away in the bedrooms or in the guest room. But Wendy keeps hammering me to have less TV time, that I would have a fuller life if I watched less TV. And she's right, and I'm working on it.
Well, I ask her the question now, Eugene. What's next for you as individuals and as a couple and as a family?
Well, we're both fortunate that we've had good careers as far as our work life. So financially, we're going to be able to, in our retiring years, to travel. We both want to travel and learn more. We need to go to Antarctica. That's the last continent we haven't been to, so we need to go walk on the ice. But I want to do education. I just finished a master's degree at Cal State in anthropology. I would like to teach in my retirement years, and also to do projects and to do things to make the world a better place. And I think we'll both do that. We just spent 2 weeks in Nicaragua in January with a family trip building 26 latrines. So I think our trips in the future will be sort of work projects both in the United States and overseas.
It's our hope that this interview is being watched by young people, and many times young people don't give any serious thought or preparation to a financial future, and yet clearly you have. Give us your insights of the value of that kind of saving and training and the payoff at the end.
I think you work hard, you put a little bit away every month and make sure that that nest egg keeps growing, and recognize that having material objects is not what brings life's greatest pleasures. If I think back on my life, in our whole conversation, we never talked about a car or a television or an iPod or whatever it is that is the electronic device of this decade. It's the experiences that you've had, it's the people you've had contact with, and I think you can keep that in the back of your mind as you move through life, that working hard and taking whatever salary you have and holding a little bit back and then giving some of it away will give you a very rich life.
Neither one of us have great desire for material things. We like art. I mean, you saw that in the house. We like paintings and folk art and artifacts that we bring back from travel. But my dad taught me a very important lesson: is spend less than you make. You know, if you keep your expenses down below your income, then you will have money at the end of the year, at the end of the decade, at the end of the time. And I think we've both done that, so we're able to put enough back so that we don't have to worry about the debates of Social Security and how much is going to be there from that event. We have enough personal savings that we'll be able to live a comfortable life.
Well, finances aside, both of you have given so much to this community and have so much more to give to our community and our world, and we wish you both the best. And all I can say to our viewers is there has been so much wisdom shared here, and be wise, make good use of it. Thanks for being with us, and until next time, I'm Don Clark.